Hi there, Serdar Yaghloup here. In this episode of Smart Python, we're going to look at PyScript, a new and highly experimental project by Anaconda, creators of the Python distribution of the same name. PyScript lets you use Python as a scripting language in web pages, both replacing and complementing JavaScript. Now, over the years, there has been various attempts at allowing Python to be used as an in-browser scripting language, whether it's because people wanted an alternative to JavaScript or because people wanted an easier way to distribute Python apps. PyScript is derived from previous efforts in this vein, such as the PyIodide project, but it's designed to be easy to dive into and get started with. It's also very much in the early stages, so there's little documentation available, but the examples that are available in the project's website give us some basics that we can work with. So let's start with the simplest possible PyScript app. This is a hello world. The first thing we need to do is include in the web page's head block an include that adds PyScript to the page. This is easy enough because the whole of PyScript is contained in a single JavaScript include. That's part of what's being pushed about it, is that it requires very little work to get up and running. So next, we create a script block in the page using the custom PyScript tag. Everything inside these tags is just regular Python code. Now, it does need to be indented and formatted correctly, so you may want to watch out if you're using a formatter for your HTML. You don't want that also to affect the way your Python scripts are formatted. You'll also notice one of the properties of the tag that we're using here is output, and that provides the ID of a div into which to render the output of the script from standard out. And so we have right here after the script block another div with the ID out. Now when we first run this, there's going to be a pause while the browser downloads the PyScript code and sets everything up. This is the single biggest drawback to using PyScript, and there's no easy way around it. It takes a while to get everything ready to run, and so there's this delay. One of the advantages JavaScript has is that it's always going to be fully native to the browser. And so, after a pause, we have a hello world. And all of this we have done by using nothing more than the standard Python metaphors, print, and the standard Python script syntax. Now, what else can we do? Well, we can also import from the standard library, and we could use everything in there. Here is a modified version of the same script that uses the datetime module to render the current date and time on output. And that process is no different from what we would do in a regular Python program. We just import datetime and then use the functions from the imported module in our print statement. Here we have a third example, modified somewhat from one of the existing examples in the PyScript demo page, which shows how we can use async and coroutines. And this will allow us to update the page on a regular basis. This also shows how we can have access to the page's document object model, what's called the DOM, by way of a predefined class named element. So if we pass element the ID of an object, we can write to that object. It's as simple as that. And the rest of the script behaves pretty much as you would expect. It does take a bit to load, but once it does so, it updates the time each second. PyScript also includes a few other components that ought to be familiar to Python users. One of them is a REPL, the read, evaluate, print loop that you find when you open the Python runtime at a command prompt. And when embedded in the web page by way of the PyREPL tag, like this, it works a little bit like a primitive Jupyter notebook. You can enter statements and then have those statements evaluated interactively. Now, if you want the full-blown experience of a Jupyter notebook, for now you're going to want to stick with the real thing. But we can see here the seeds of how a full-blown Jupyter-like environment could be created with nothing but Python directly in the browser, instead of by way of a remote kernel accessed through a browser interface. Now, as you might well imagine, it's possible to have back-and-forth interaction between the JavaScript side of things and the Python side of things. One of the demos included in the PyScript demo roundup is worth looking at in detail for this. This is an interactive exploration of a dataset. It's the locations and times of taxi pickups in Manhattan, New York City, over a 24-hour period. And we can use these controls here to modify various parameters of the presentation, which hour of the data to use, what the visualization looks like, and so on and so forth. But all of the actual crunching of the data is handled on the Python side. Again, Python running in the browser as WebAssembly. The presentation side of things is handled with JavaScript and the DeckGL library. So there is a two-way interaction between the JavaScript side in the browser and the Python side in the browser. Let's take a closer look at how all of this is set up. In the source code for this example, you'll see we have a tag named pyenv. And this is used to the same end as something like requirements.txt is used in a Python project. It's used to list all the third-party packages that we want to employ in this program. If we look in the console log for this page, we can see where those packages were downloaded and set up for use. And note that this means that this particular page has quite a load time, which I've omitted for the sake of this demo. And that in turn implies that there's a great many performance improvements that could be made to how all of this works, for how it can be handled in the future. For instance, we could have all these packages cached locally in the browser and then reused as needed. But those are improvements that are probably going to come further down the line once other things have been settled. Now, if we look through the code, we can see some interesting things going on here. For one, the HTML widgets that are used to control the display, those sliders that I was playing with, those are actually rendered in Python by way of the panel library. The visualization, the way that they are turned into something that we can see in the browser, is handled by DeckGL in JavaScript, but it's generated on the Python side. So all we're using JavaScript for here is to render the things that have been computed on the Python side. Again, computed in the browser, not computed on a server remotely, and then sent to us. So as you can guess from all that you've seen here, PyScript is still quite primordial. There's a number of demos available on the PyScript site that give you some idea of what's possible, and I encourage digging into them if you're curious. Some of them are quite fun. Now, we still have a ways to go before PyScript can be used to casually deploy most any Python script to an end user, and that is one of its stated goals. But for now, you can get your hands dirty with the first iteration of it. You can play with the demos and dig into them for yourself to see how they operate. That's it for this video. If you liked it, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Tech Talk channel on YouTube. And for more Smart Python and more Dev with Serdar, be sure to follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and Infoworld.com.